Hello everyone, the RPG Bunded here, final boss in Internet Shitlords. But once again, my cat is blocking, this is the other cat this time, is blocking the image of my Lion and Dragon RPG. There's my cat. It's a different cat. But, yeah, see, I can defeat the swine on the internet forums, but I can't stop my cats from getting in the way of my shot. That's life, I guess. So today I want to talk to you about a new thing that we're going to be working on that is called Everything They Taught You Was Wrong on Purpose. And this is a little series I'm going to go through of stuff that if you're a brand new gamer, you may have ended up hearing in all kinds of advice to new GMs, to new players, to new game designers, conventional wisdom of the modern era, which is unbelievably wrong. And it's wrong, like I said, on purpose, because there are certain vested interests of ideas and notions about gaming that that certain groups have, goes contrary to the original spirit of the game. I figured we should start with the first and by far the biggest one, which is balance. You may have heard at some point or another that it's very important, if you're a DM, that your game be balanced. That means that you should make sure that, you know, the player characters have a variety of classes, that no one character is more powerful than the other, that, you know, everybody should be the same level, that if you're designing a game, you have to be very careful that the classes balance each other out. This is all bullshit. Every single thing about that is wrong. And let me explain why. Because balance is assuming that an RPG is an effort to create a gamified environment in the sense of, the same sense that you would see in a board game, okay? It's also done intentionally by people who want to diminish the notion of authentic worlds in gaming play. So what I mean is this. You're playing an RPG, D&D, or Lion and Dragon that's just there behind my cat's ass, or any other RPG. What you're doing in an RPG is you're creating a virtual world, and you're going into that world, and you're playing a character in that world, and that character is somebody who should eventually come alive for you. They should be a part of your experience. This is what's called immersion. When you go deep into your character, you sympathize with your character, your character seems to take up on their own personality, a life of their own. There are people who don't want that to be what RPGs are about, but that is what RPGs are about. That, and creating an effective virtual world that simulates that. So you have to have a world that feels real for immersion to happen. Okay? So an emulative world. Now, in an emulative world, unless the genre you're emulating is very, very strange, there is no balance. There's no way that, for example, you should have a group of characters go into a random cave, and that cave just randomly happens to have exactly the type or power level of opponents that will be just enough of a challenge for these players, but not so much that they can't handle it and will get themselves killed if they try to fight. So that's the notion of balance. The idea of balance is we're going to go in and have a scenario where, with a challenge rating that's equivalent to the player characters, they'll be able to kill X amount of monsters, and it'll be, you know, there'll be a risk for some of them might die, but they'll basically be able to win, and then they'll get a certain amount of treasure that's commensurate to their level as well. right? And same thing in character creation, this idea that classes all have to balance out. All of that is wrong because it defeats emulation. So it's not just bad design, it's fundamentally contrary design to the intentions of RPGs. Now, what does this mean? This means some scary stuff if you're a newbie GM who's only played in 5th edition games run by people who belong to sharing circles or something like that, you know, by people who want to talk about their feelings. In an old school role-playing game, like Lion and Dragon, for example, when you create a character, you roll 3d6 in order for every ability score, right? You might start with a d4 hit points, right? Or a d6 if you're lucky. And if you don't have magic, you're healing 1 of those hit points per day. So there's a much higher level of personal risk. But beyond that, there's a level of unfairness because you're going to have some characters that are going to have really high rolls, some that are going to have really low rolls. Beyond that, there are going to be certain classes that are just going to be so much better in certain situations. For example, if you want to really shine in combat, you play a fighter. A fighter or warrior, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the one that's going to do really, really well in combat. If in your game, the fighter doesn't do superbly better in combat than every other class, you've designed the game wrong. Now, at the same time, the wizard should be the best at magic, of course, and the thief should be the best at sneaking around, doing stuff that involves resolving puzzles and challenges, and the cleric should be the one that has the best benefit against demonic forces, evil powers, and that sort of thing. So what this is not balanced. You know, if you put a fighter and you put a thief in a hand-to-hand melee fight, then that thief is dead, right? If you put a thief in a situation where he can sneak up on the fighter, then that fighter is probably dead. And this is intentional. This is what's called niche protection, right? It's the idea that every class should not be able to do the same things or should not even be close to doing the same things, but that each class will be good at the one or two things that it is meant to do. In terms of levels, you're playing an old school game. Well, when you die, you start again at level 1, or in Lion and Dragon's case, at level 0. So you're playing a character that's brand new after your old character died, and the rest of your party is going to be higher level than you, and you're going to have to take your time to catch up. And that's just how it goes. Your character backgrounds could be radically unbalanced, right? One character might have been born the son of a baron, and the other one a serf, right? And this is unlike in D&D, where it's just, you know, medieval happy fun time land where those things don't matter. In a game like Lion and Dragon, they do. And this is also an inherent part of the game. The idea is your character shouldn't have to be equally special to every other character. There's different levels of ability that each character will have. And what should matter is not that your character is just as good at everything as everybody else's, or even equally good in a general sense to everybody else's, but it's what you make with the character you have. What is important in terms of game design, in terms of GMing, is that your game be interesting. And a game where you know you're going to go into a cave, you're going to fight against opponents that are moderately the same as you, but you know, weaker enough that you're going to be able to beat them and then walk out with a certain amount of treasure. That's not really interesting. Not after a little while. It becomes kind of dull. Now, if you get a bunch of first level characters and they have to sneak into a dragon's lair and find a gem and take that gem out or whatever, right? If they're facing some opponents who they just aren't going to be able to beat, and then they said they have to figure out another plan or work around it or do other things, that's interesting. If your character is a weakling compared to some of the other characters, he hasn't started with any of the benefits, then you have to make a story as a player about why the hell he's there. What's he doing there, right? What's their reason for being there, and what's their the element of their personality that puts them into this situation. And is that character delusional? Is that character aspirational? Are they hoping to become the best in spite of their, weakling status? Well, that's the hero's journey right there. That's the most interesting story ever told, because humanity's been telling it over and over again since forever, right? And you've got there a whole bunch of possibilities. Characters you're never going to remember 20 years from now. Speaking as someone who's been gaming for more than 20 years now, 20 years from now, you're never going to remember that character you made that was average power compared to everybody else, and they were all equally the same and whatever. You're going to remember that time that you had a character that started out with 1 hit point and had to somehow manage to survive, through these dungeons, enough to level up, and then made its way along and had all kinds of disadvantages compared to other people, and then somehow overcame and triumphed, right? The lack of imbalance prevents you from being able to triumph, right? The balanced encounters, balanced worlds, and balanced characters are actually a disadvantage at all levels for playing and for DMing and for game design. They make games less interesting, not more. Do they make them unfair? Well, there's always going to be another character. Sometimes you're going to be playing the one at the top, and sometimes you're going to be playing the one at the bottom, and that's the nature of how it goes. Sometimes you're this guy here, and sometimes you're that guy there, right? That's how it's supposed to be, because that's a reflection of the real world. So I'm sorry that it's not fair, Cupcake, but life is not fair. Get yourself into a different perspective. It's not about being fair. It's about what are you going to do with the qualities and resources you have. And that is the essence of RPGs, because it's about managing the situation you have and somehow triumphing over the danger. So, if you like this video, let me know. Let me know what other things you think are things that right now they are teaching people wrong on purpose about RPGs. And I don't want to mean in terms of like political stuff necessarily, but I mean in terms of the sort of thing I talked about here. Tell me something about the way people are playing today, about the rules, about the game, about GM advice, especially that sort of thing. Advice for GMs, advice for game designers that you hear all the time and that you think is wrong and that probably has a motive behind being wrong. And tell me about that, and then maybe I'll do a video about it like I did about this one. So the thing about this one is that, just to clarify why it's wrong, right? Why people are teaching it wrong, is that there is a class of people that want to create games that are not about being in virtual worlds, right? And instead, they want to create games that are about telling stories or about, teaching you something. And this ruins the experience. If you don't have immersion, you don't have the RPG experience. You're doing something else at that point, right? So keep that in mind. Oh, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed before. And check out the Inappropriate Characters channel, where we're going to be doing another post sometime or near the end of the month here. Keep an eye out for that, and please support us on Patreon, because that will allow us to make more of these sorts of videos for you. This is the RPG Pundit, final boss and internet shitlords, signing off. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Volcano with Blue Boar.